All right. So, welcome everyone. I'm Nick Wagner Sr., and this is another episode of the Full Potential Live Show. For you, those of you in the U.S., it's Sunday night and it's Father's Day. So, happy Father's Day to all the dads out there. And I'm super excited. We do this every Sunday night. We interview an amazing guest with a really unique career story, and people keep asking me, why do I do this? Why do I spend my Sunday nights at 8 o'clock Eastern Time talking to all sorts of people around the world? And it's my way of sharing career inspiration with everyone that I'm connected with. And I love hearing all these people's different unique career journeys because I learn something from everyone I talk to. So this evening, we are meeting with MS. So I'll say her name is Mahima Sharma, but she goes by MS. That is her nickname, I guess, that she was given at one of her different jobs that she's done. So MS, welcome to the show. I really appreciate you joining. I think we're gonna have a great conversation.
Thank you so much, Nick.
And and we were talking before this. So we're live on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then we
Mhm.
record this. It goes on YouTube. We then share that link out after the show with everyone that didn't get to see us live. And then I also take the audio and put it into the Full Potential podcast. So if you don't want to watch us on video, you can also listen to us on your favorite podcasts, whether it's on Apple or Spotify or Google or Anchor or whatever your favorite is. We'll have it there. So we're gonna have a great conversation about MS's career and a lot of questions to go through. So I want to start with when you meet someone, say it's at a conference or you're out with a friend, and you meet someone for the first time, and they say, "What do you do?" So what do you do for work? How do you
Mhm.
answer that?
Oh, that's an interesting question. So I generally start with the story that I started with. I say my name, and then there are a million questions around it, which I generally dodge by asking them to call me MS. So with the name, I start with explaining that I am an HR professional with more than a decade of HR experience in different capacities and have worked with multiple 500 Fortune companies in different continents. Currently, I am working with another 500 Fortune company and the enterprise lead for a project on competencies and supporting an HR business partner role for a leading business. From an education perspective, I've got my master's degree from Cornell University in industrial and labor relations. And from a passion perspective, I love combining technology with HR for more effective and efficient business solutions. Currently based in sunny California, but love the East Coast. I think, yeah, that's generally how I would
All right.
introduce myself.
So and I always like to share. People always ask like, where do I find my guests? And some of the guests I know personally, and some of the guests are recommended by other guests that I've had on different things like that. But so MS and I actually work together. So and it's not a surprise. You can look us up on LinkedIn. We work at Cigna in
Yeah.
HR together. And I was really like honored when you reached out to me and said, "Hey, I really like what you're doing on Sunday nights. Can I be on the show?"
Hmm.
And I was like, "Yeah, I think that would be a lot of fun." And the real I think power of having you on the show tonight is, and as I mentioned earlier, I've had some other guests on the show that were not born here in the U.S. that moved here for school or for work and now live in the U.S. But I cannot wait for you to tell your story about why you decided to leave India, where you were born, where your family is, where you grew up, to come to the
Hmm.
U.S. for school and then ultimately work. And we're going to get into that because I think
Hmm.
that's it obviously was a huge life decision for you to get up and leave everything you know and come to the U.S. And I think I
Hmm.
want to kind of walk through that because I think that's something that I think a lot of people would be afraid to do that, including myself. So I think it takes a lot of courage. But I want to start with so you're in human resources.
Hmm.
When you were little MS back in India, playing with your friends, growing up, riding bikes, living with your family, did you
Hmm.
even know what human resources was? Or, because of a parent or a family friend, or did you not want to be in HR when you were a little kid? Like what was that first dream job that you remember having?
Uh, so yes, let me start with I did not know what HR was, what human resources was.
I'm not surprised
Um,
by that.
I think one of the generally in Indian movies, the way people show that there are a couple of professions that people know. So my dad was a banker, my mom's a teacher, and yeah, most of the people in and around the city where I lived, which was a small town, were either teachers, bankers, or had their own business. So wasn't much of HR or marketing or finance happening around other than being in the bank. So I did not really know. I just knew I wanted to work and earn money. But then I grew up a little, and there was one incident where I knew exactly what I wanted to be. And not that I am that, but a defining moment was I wanted to be an astronaut. I think it was school when my mom took me to one of the grad schools where Kalpana Chawla, who was an Indian woman astronaut who made it to NASA here, mom took me to that school and where she studied and kind of showed me how the classes and everything. That had a very interesting impact that I could see that somebody from a small town made it all the way to the US to NASA and did something that I really liked. And that kind of had a very long lasting impact. Not that I am an astronaut now, but that was, I would say, that I had a profession exactly defined in my head that I wanted to do that as a kid. But yeah, HR was nowhere on the horizon at that time.
No, I was not surprised to hear that, and I'm with you. I was not thinking of that either when I was a kid. But it's interesting. So I love that story because I think a lot of times parents and maybe educators don't fully understand the impact one person can have on a kid. And you mentioned like the idea of being an astronaut and how inspired you were by the journey of this woman from a small town in India to becoming an astronaut with NASA.
Mm-hmm.
And you ended up not being an astronaut, but obviously you were inspired by her journey and probably helped shape who you are today. So I love that story because I think the more we can expose kids to careers early on in their life,
Mm-hmm.
I think the better, right? Because kids just don't know what's out there. I mean, to your point,
Yep.
you saw what people were around you. They were bankers, they were educators, entrepreneurs, and you really didn't
Mm-hmm.
understand like the scope of like how many jobs there really were. So
Yep.
you ended up going to school for business. You ended up going to school, college for business or university,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and was the expectation of your parents that you were always going to go to college or university, or was that something that was up for debate in your household? How did that work?
So undergrad was never a question. Um, my I think again it's got something to do with where you come from. I think, and I might just give a lot of examples and references of being from an Indian family and a middle class Indian family. For us, I think the best asset that any parent or any family could provide in an Indian middle class family was to make their kids self sufficient by providing them everything they could in terms of the right education and the guidance. So the entire focus, the entire time was on education for us. So undergrad was not even a question. Masters for me just changed a little bit, but yes, undergrad, I think even in terms of selecting the field that I wanted to be in was a factor of the score that I had in school. The school score decided kind of the field that I wanted to explore, and also, like you said, the other people that I saw around kind of gave me what are the options that are available that can then get me a job. It was more focused on how to be self-sufficient, financially independent, and at that time, I think I wasn't as focused on what do I really enjoy because we didn't really have the time to explore that as much. The entire effort was spent in school, getting marks, scoring well, so that you get into the next class, that then you get into school because everything was very, very competitive. So
Yeah.
yes. Mhm.
So how much pressure was put on you from either your parents or the overall education system for you to keep excelling in school? Was it stressful as a kid?
In general, I would say yes. I was just a very happy and a very fun child. The two parallels in the same house. My sister, being the elder one, I think had a lot of pressure, and I am 6.5 years younger to her, and somehow I managed to not get that pressure,
Yeah.
get to me. And I don't know, was it because, my parents were exhausted by the time my turn came, or my parents understood that let it be. She'll figure it out. But I played a lot of sports. My mom got me into sports very early. I think I started playing when I was in the first standard or second standard, and played my first nationals in the fifth standard. So it just helped me balance my, I think, the pressure that I felt from school with the fun that I had with sports. So, in general, if I have to talk from an Indian education system, yes, it is very competitive. There is pressure because sheer numbers and sheer talent, because there are only X number of seats that are available, and there are X plus X raised to power n students available for it. But there's always different ways to manage it. And also, things have changed. Fields have been introduced that were not there when we were kids, when we were in school. And I think parents have changed, and the education system has evolved in terms of not giving the pressure as it was when I was
Yeah.
a kid.
I mean, I think you bring up a good point with sports, and I think a lot of a lot of kids play sports for fun, but there's a lot of great learnings from sports too about teamwork and just like the discipline to do a sport and everything you learn from that. So,
Yeah.
and to your point, it also helps balance out the schoolwork. So I think it's a great point. So you graduated from college. You got your first degree. Let me back up. You got your first degree. You were done in 2008,
Yeah.
which was the
Undergrad
middle
from,
the middle of the global financial crisis.
yes.
You
Yes.
graduated from college,
Yeah.
and so how did you got a job right away, right? So I mean, you
Yeah.
graduated,
Yeah.
you got a job right away. So how was I mean, were you nervous? Were you scared? How was that process of graduating in the middle of a global financial crisis from school and finding a job? Because it seems like you didn't have too difficult of a challenge.
Now when I think of it, yes. But so again, it's very different now that I've seen it here in the US. It's very different. I've seen that kids try and get, after their undergrad, they try and get a job to get some experience, and then try to do their masters. Whereas in India, what at least the path that my sister took, and the path that I'd seen my family, my cousin and the extended family take, was we would do our undergrad, and then we would immediately get into masters and then find a job. With me, luckily, like you said, it was 2008, mid of the crisis, and a company. So this is the story how I actually was introduced to HR, and it combines with the question also. A company called HCL, Hindustan Computer Limited, was come to interview in our college, in my undergrad school, and there were about 200 students interviewing for that company. There was one recruiter who was there, and there were supposed to be four of them. Somehow, just one ended up coming to the school, and she had to interview all 200 of us to find, I think, 6 or 10 students from our school.
That's a lot of
And
interviews.
yes, and she was struggling. As soon as she saw the numbers, she was struggling, and she was concerned that she just had one day, I think 1 or 2 days, and she had to cover everybody because everybody had, sent in their applications. So she asked for volunteers, and being the enthusiastic person, which I've given an example by volunteering for this as well, I said, I want to help you. I don't know how. You tell me what you want, but I want to help you because I can clearly see that you need help right now. I think there were 4 or 5 of us who volunteered to help her. And she said, define a plan. Literally, I remember her words very clearly. She's like, define a plan so that by the end of the day, I have met all 200 students somehow or the other. And I give you full autonomy on how you would do it.
So let me pause you for a second. Did you volunteer to help because you're a kind person that's very empathetic, or did you offer to help because you thought it would help you get a job, or a little bit of both?
I would say I could just see her face. I still remember her face when she saw 200 people turn up in that interview. What do you call that? In the hall where she was interviewing us.
Yeah.
There were students inside the hall, and there were students waiting to get in. And I could see the fright on her face that she would not be able to complete all of them, all the interviews. I did not even, so if I remember correctly, she was interviewing for marketing and finance, and I did not think this is going to help me get a job, because it was not an HR job that she was looking for, you know. And not that I knew at that time that this is going to be in HR. So all I think I did was, one, I am a hyperactive person. I have a lot of energy. So I got excited by just the opportunity that I would never get to manage 200 students of my school, you know,
Right.
get that position that I can manage these people. And honestly, at that time, I felt I can learn something which might benefit me later in my job. It
Yeah.
wasn't with the intention that I might get an opportunity with this company. The intention was I get to manage this group, and I get to fulfill an expectation that somebody completely unknown has set in 3 sentences. How do I match the two and get the desired outcome? That was it. I think that
That was
was,
it. Yeah.
yeah, that was the thought I had in the moment. Except her face, like that was one of the first thing. She was pale white. She was white completely, because she was like, "Oh shoot, how do I complete these 200 interviews?" But yeah, I think that was the thought which kind of got me started on it. And my intention was to interview for a finance position with that company, and here I am. But so we ended up doing those. I had a plan. We made it like a group discussion with 10 individuals in each group, and then cut them down to, or shortlisted from every group about two or three, and then did another group discussion. So I did 3 rounds of those, and then finally she ended up one-on-one interviews. I think what 20 or so by the end of the day, from which she selected 20 or 30 or so, and she ended up selecting 6 or 8 students in all. When it was my turn, she looked at my CV, whatever it was, with undergrad, literally just the scores of it and everything.
So you had no work experience at that point.
No, no. I'd just gone from school to undergrad and literally no experience. It's very different in India as compared to what it is here. I had not done any voluntary activities, no volunteering, no in between experience before school and college, nothing.
It was just
Uh,
grades.
it was just great. And probably, I think with for me, I had my sports achievements,
Right.
my state nationals. I represented state, then I'd represented, I think I'd reached the national level. So I had just multiple sports that I had on my CV. That's it. So I said I want to apply for the finance position, and she showed me my CV, and it had HR written like on top of the CV, and I was like, no, no, no. I have done my undergrad in commerce. I am an accounts person. I love accounting. I've scored the highest in it. There's no course called human resources. So I don't know what you're talking about. And she's like, I'm gonna get you an HR, and I will talk to you after 2 years, and then we'll decide whether you want to be in this role or not. And here I am, 10 years, and I'm still here, loving it. So much so that I actually got 3 more degrees. Cornell was the third one actually after that degree that I left. So yeah, so somebody else decided HR for me. I really
It's
didn't.
just it's just such a unique story, simply because it's I think it's not what anyone would expect, right? And I mean, not even yourself. I mean,
Yeah.
you had no intention of going to that job interview to get an HR job. You were going for finance.
Yep.
So what did you do? Like, so you ended up working with HCL for a little over 3 years. What did you do in
Mhm.
your first HR role? And I asked that because, and you know this very well, there are not an abundance of early career HR jobs. So many of
Mhm.
the HR jobs that you and I, people we work with and peers at our company and other companies are more senior. So what did
Mhm.
you do as an early career HR person at HCL?
I think I ended up getting very, very lucky with HCL. Actually, most of my companies, I think I've ended up being very lucky, being at the right time at the right position. And uh, with HCL, they had just started. So they also had a very similar leadership development program for students who had done their masters. And then they were trying to get undergrads from different schools to support them. Luckily, in my case, the person who I was supposed to support ended up moving and gradually leaving. So I had to take charge and fill in for her.
Mm.
So I got the opportunity to do exactly the work that a senior, I don't know if I can call senior HR, but an HR, professional HR would have done. rather than supporting. So we got, I think, a month or so, or a little over a month, very strict, I would say, HR training where we used to have classes, literally a session every day from different teams, and then tests with it and scoring and everything that happened, like a proper assessment center. And then we were put on the floor. My first job was HR for HR. Undergrad who has no HR experience
Wow.
managing HR was, I think, the best way to learn HR. And just with it, I got HR for CEO's office, marketing, sales, and I think last that was added was finance. So I literally had all support functions, which had access
Right.
to the CEO, CFO, and everybody. By the time, I think in 3 years, I pretty much covered all the support functions. There was obviously an individual above me, but
Yeah.
it was just amazing with the little knowledge, I can say that, this professional knowledge I had of the function, but the faith that the organization put in me that I could learn it. And then every time that I exhibited something that I could show that, I did well, they increased the scope of my role. So that really helped. But that's the story for HCL.
No, I love that. It's just such a unique story. And while you were doing this, while you were doing an HR job that, to your point, like you really never set out to have, never set out to get, to your point, weren't super qualified for based off of your experience. You were also getting another degree.
Yes, I was getting another degree because again, the fundamentals were very um, deep set in that you need that professional education to make you feel confident that you can contribute. So it's one thing to learn on the job, and I was like, I don't have the professional education to support it, so I need to get that, and that comes from a course or a professional course that I was doing, or books, literally. So
Right.
while I was learning all this at work, I was doing the full time, yeah, the part time course that with another school.
No, I mean, and it kind of shows, how much of a lifelong learner you are because you continued going to school. Well, you went to school two more times after that, right?
Yeah.
If because 2 degrees wasn't enough, you wanted to keep going. But and you ended up staying at HCL for 3 years before you ended up going to Accenture, and then you went to another company, a couple other
Mhm.
companies within India,
Mhm.
doing different HR jobs.
Mhm.
Why did you leave? Ultimately, because HCL took a chance on it. Why did you ultimately leave there to go to Accenture, and make that move?
Hmm. HCL, I think I was managing about, I think, 5,000 people globally by the time I left. So 3 years, 5,000 people. It's strange to say, but after a point, and I was doing HR business partner role, right? I'd started my career with it. And also, I have this very deep passion of technology. So
Mm-hmm.
I did projects with it, with my HRBP role, on how I could, use technology to advance HR for solutions and everything. So I kept doing all of that, but somewhere I felt that I knew the teams that I was handling. So I was asking for a complete change in the role, either, you know, change my business stakeholders that I'm managing, because
Right.
I exactly know what issues are going to come up, what are the pain points, what are the solutions. So it's become very, the learning probably is not as much as I had it in the
Yeah,
last three
the
years.
learning slowed down. Right. That makes
Yeah,
sense.
even though people don't change, like the people, everybody is different, but still I had that feeling that I can manage these 5,000 people. It's not as if I can put it, it's not as stressful, which I kind of liked in the beginning, that I had that pressure that I have to learn and fulfill the expectations of about 5,000 people. Wasn't happening. And I felt that, the stagnancy. And then I asked for the role change. That wasn't happening. And then Accenture came up with a completely different, it was HR business partner, but they had some consulting projects in between. And also they had some projects focused on, again, technology with HR and how we can use technology. That sounded attractive. Um, Salary was obviously, I'll be honest about it. Financial gain was huge with Accenture. and then the brand, and then the size. Again, the scale was great with Accenture. So that kind of led. Although, yeah, the learning that I had in HCL, I think I would say the maximum was in HCL, and then Tata's probably.
Well, so it's interesting because a lot of, I think you were very lucky with HCL because a lot of people, in their early careers in HR, do not
Hmm.
get to do HR business partner roles. That is not a
Yeah,
typical role that many people get to do. So
yeah,
I think you actually had a really great, to your point, baseline fundamental learning experience at HCL
yeah.
that set you up for being successful so far in HR throughout your career.
Yeah.
So again, like what an amazing opportunity.
Mm.
What and you went to HR at Accenture. You worked at a couple other companies, but eventually you decided to make a really large change in your life, right? So see,
Yeah,
I guess here's where I'm going with this. You were doing really well working in
yeah.
India. You
Hmm.
you were working at Tata, which for those that don't know, Tata or TCS, Tata is one of the biggest conglomerates from a business perspective in India. I mean,
Hmm.
Tata is in I don't even know how many industries, MS, but they make everything from cars to I think they do like different medical supplies, and they literally everything, right?
Yeah, pretty much, I would say.
So I think for those in the U.S., you could think of maybe like what GE used to be here in the U.S.,
Hmm.
but
Yeah,
but even like I think more diversified.
yeah.
So you were working at I think was probably one of the most respected companies in India,
Hmm.
and you decide to give it all up and travel halfway across the world, right? And
Hmm.
and again, it's not like you weren't giving it up for a good reason. You got into Cornell, which is I think one of the most prestigious schools in the world, but you
Hmm.
decided to leave your home, leave your career, and
Hmm.
uproot your entire life and go to Cornell in
Hmm.
upstate New York to
Hmm.
do grad school.
Hmm.
What I take walk me through the decision process because I'm sure this wasn't like you woke up one day and were like, I'm going to go to grad school and I'm going to go to the U.S. and leave India. So is this something that you had thought about for years in advance, for months in advance? Who did you talk to before you made the decision? Why did you make the decision? Like walk me and the audience through how you came to such a large life decision when you were doing. And I only asked so many questions because you had a fantastic career
Yeah,
in HR in India. So it wasn't like things weren't going well.
yeah. Yeah, I know my dad had the same question. He's like, "Are you sure? You really seem to have it all together right now, and you want to give it all up and go to a place where we don't know if you'll find a job because the visa sponsorships and everything, which I'll get later." But um, yes, I had gained all the right experiences. I got the right roles. I got the right opportunities. I got to work with multiple, with companies, teams, lived in multiple cities. One of the basic things I think which defines the way I think is something that my dad taught us when we were very young, both me and my sister. He said geographic, the location, geography is never or should never be a barrier for growth. And at that time, I never really understood. I was like, what does that mean? And when my sister was growing up, she wanted to go to grad school, and she had to move out of the city where we were, or town where we were living. That was the first time I understood the definition. Okay, so geography, constraints for location should not be what define you or stop you from growth. Then, when I kept moving for jobs, my dad kept encouraging me for, okay, this gives you growth. Move. I moved from Chandigarh, where my parents are, to Delhi, then to Bangalore for Accenture, then back to Delhi, then Mumbai in the last for Tatas. So I never really had an issue with location. So I never thought of India. I never thought of US. I never thought of
Mm-hmm.
locations as such. So that was one. And second, one of the reasons US probably I would say was somewhere in my mind was my sister's here. She moved in 2008, just the time when I got my first job. She got married, she moved here, and she had a job. So I saw that there is a chance, there is an
Right.
opportunity. Um, she didn't go to grad school here in the US, but she went to grad school in India. And I saw that how she used her education in India to make sure that she had a very successful career here in the US. So I felt either I can do that if I ever wanted to do. I had no plans to move for work. So that was the second factor why US at least was there in my mind. The third factor, which was a defining factor, I would say, was the team that I was working in Tata. My boss and my boss's boss, both of them were PhDs. One was in organization behavior, if I remember correctly, and the other was in psychology. And it was such a pleasure working with them. The depth of knowledge that they had to offer, just from their educational background, and not from the experience that they had with Tata, but just the educational background that they had and the perspective that they brought to the table. I was so impressed with it. And I always somehow felt that, how do I get it? And I asked her, I remember clearly, I had that discussion with my boss at that time. And I asked her, I said, how do I get this? And she's like, you will have to do a full-time master's from a school and then go to PhD. And that for that in India, you have to leave your job. I was like, okay, let's see what I can do here. And I started looking at schools. What I was finding in India, I think one or two schools had very specific human resources education. And I was very clear that I wanted to study human resources.
Right.
I love the field that I'm in, so much so that I'm ready to give up the job and learn more about it and come back to it so that I can offer more. And that's when I talked to my best friend who was here. He was here, he was studying in UMass at that time. And he started suggesting colleges to me. One of the first ones, I think, was Purdue that I shortlisted, and then Michigan because I had experience. Cornell was never in my list because I never thought I would get it. And I remember the day I got my Purdue shortlist is when I thought I would apply for Cornell. I had not told my parents for the longest time that I was preparing for the test because I never thought I could get through. And that's why the conversation of, it did seem real till the time I actually had the first letter in my hand that I had to start mentally preparing myself that I might be leaving the country, that I might have to leave my parents. It was just step by step. You start studying. I could only see one thing. If I start preparing for this exam, the next step is to apply for colleges. The next step is to get the letter. The next step would be doing the next, talking to parents and maybe talking to them. Okay, I may be moving to a completely different country. And I think the confidence to do all of this, again, comes from the way we were brought up.
Right.
Education for our family I'll take you back to the initial question. It was something my dad always supported. And for my mom, because I'd seen my dad support my mom throughout her journey of being an educator and how she wanted to follow her passion of being a cricketer. She was into sports from the very beginning, and how my dad supported her in both the things and also managing a family. So I knew my dad would support me in anything that I wanted to do, which would help me progress, whatever it was, whether it was getting an education, whether it was leaving the country, whether it was leaving them behind, which breaks my heart and theirs for sure. But it just kept happening. It was a step-by-step thing, but I didn't really stop and think about one thing at a time at that time. I just had I want to give this test. That's my first step. Then I'm going to get the letter, and then I'm going to talk to my parents. And that left me with few months to figure everything out. And in all of this, I had my sister who was here, my best friend who was supporting me with all the research and education and resources that were required to get through the process. And then I started reaching out to a lot of other people through LinkedIn, Facebook groups, etc., to find out the right colleges, to find out whether it was the right decision for an Indian international student to move to a country where, H-1B, the visa process is different for us. Is it the right choice to do this? What options do I have if I don't plan to stay there? Mm-hmm. Would I be able to come back to my company? Would I be able to come back to the country and still would the education hold value? So I wanted to make sure that I go to a school that has global acceptance. If it is not India, then can I go to another country and use that? And again, I think luck or my hard work with Tata paid off. They were so happy with my decision that they actually offered that you take a sabbatical, and if things don't work out, you come back to us. You
Oh
don't have
wow.
to. So I actually was on sabbatical till the time I found Cigna. I signed Cigna as the full-time offer, and that's when I they said that now you can let go of us and start your journey in the US. So I I wish I had a step-by-step approach. I might have it if somebody who's going through it, I can be reminded of the steps, but I don't remember sitting down one day and saying, I want to go to the US. I want to study.
Right.
And then it was the schools that kind of decided it for me, what will be the location. And then finding the resources that supported it, whether it was having my sister around, whether it was having a support system like my best friend, and knowing the area a little bit. And then it was finance was a very big factor because, international students don't really get too many scholarships in the very
Right.
beginning.
Right.
There are very limited resources for us for scholarships. So finance was a factor. And then having the option to come back. So having a global education that will give you the value if you come back to your country and you want to use that experience. I think all of that played a very important role. And I think somewhere my parents felt more comfortable because they felt that their two kids are at least in the same country now,
Yeah. Yeah.
rather than three of us split across the globe. Like I was in Mumbai, my parents were in Chandigarh, which was like a 3 hour flight, which is not too much for US, but for India it is. And then my sister is all the way in the US. Now at least two of us are here and parents are there. It makes it a little more comfortable for them.
No, that's interesting. I love hearing your decision process because I think a lot of people wouldn't even start the journey because they're afraid of leaving their, where they're from. So,
Yeah.
and that thought really didn't even cross your mind, I think, because of how you were raised with your parents and just how you kind of
Hmm.
walked yourself through the process. So
Hmm.
you ended up going to Cornell, which is obviously a fantastic school, and you were a teaching assistant. So I'm
Yeah.
assuming that that was a big part of why, factored in, from a financial perspective going to Cornell,
Yeah.
because you had a job, right? So
Hmm.
so I want to hear about this. So what did you teach, and
Hmm.
had you taught anything before?
Uh, I for Cornell, I was teaching analytics and I don't remember the second subject. This is interesting. I don't even remember the second subject, but the professor was teaching undergrad students, and I was a TA for him, and he was my advisor as well. And I'd reached out to him, and he suggested, "Do you want to be a TA?" And I was like, "Sure," and then let's try this. I had never professionally taught
Right.
anything before. And plus, again, this was my first experience in the US. It is very, very different as compared to what it is back home in India for undergrad school. It was interesting. It was a learning curve every single day, whether it was as a TA, whether it was as a student, whether just as a human being existing in the different
Yeah.
countries. So no, I had not taught anything. I had not professionally done it. So I was asking a lot of questions, and I was trying my best to balance between the demands that the professor had as a TA. As a TA, you're supposed to fulfill some
Right.
some things, and then the demands that the students had because it was a tough course. So it was an interesting journey, and it was the third semester, I think, for me. So I had my own courses to
Yeah, this is
finish.
all while learning yourself. Right.
Yeah, this was all while learning myself, and also because we had a lot of pressure. The international students try to finish their courses early. Uh, and I don't want to say this about myself, but again, I think it's the competitiveness or one of the strengths and or weaknesses in me. But um, we had 48 credits that we were supposed to take for the year, and I had to finish those in 3 semesters so that I was eligible for my visa in March. Whereas actually the school was closing in April, like I was supposed to graduate in April. So I actually had 4 semesters to finish 48 credits. But for visa purposes, I had to finish in 3 semesters. That means I had to speed up my learning, and I had to put that pressure of completing everything before December, or I think February was the timeline. So Signa could apply for H1B at that time. So all of this, the TA learning and everything was happening while I was trying to finish up all my courses to make sure that I am eligible for the visa. I ended up doing all of it. Luckily, the class passed the I think entire 100% of that, and I graduated with I think 72 credits rather than 48, and almost a perfect GPA. So yeah, it was interesting journey with the TA. And yes, it was. I think the financial part of it just helped me a lot. We got an internship that was paid. Then I got a
Right.
TA-ship that was paid. So it covered two of my semesters that I managed to pay by myself. And then actually 3 semesters I paid by myself, and then one was with my dad. I asked dad to support me.
So I want to ask. So that was the like the working perspective and the school perspective. Had you been to the U.S. before you came to Cornell for school?
I had visited my sister once before,
You visit.
but that was yeah, that was fun. I mean, I never even saw the schools. I never knew what I was. This that was back in 2011. I think I'd visited the first time, and I was like, "Oh, this is fun. Everything is taken care of. You don't have to worry about food. You don't have to nothing." I did not even know how much a burger costed. I never placed an order, so I had no idea.
Right.
And how difficult it is to get from A place to B if you don't know driving, if you don't know how to drive, especially upstate New York. Um, no
So how
support system.
what? So how was it from a from a culture perspective?
Oh,
You moved to Ithaca, New York, and
uh,
for those listening or watching, Ithaca, New York, where Cornell is located, is in upstate New York. It's very rural. It's basically like this college in the middle of the woods, almost, right? I mean,
yeah,
Ithaca is Cornell. Cornell is Ithaca,
yes,
and maybe and
yes,
I think there's one other
almost.
school there too.
Yeah,
Uh, which obviously, just let's just start with the simple thing. The climate is very different, from where you were in India.
yeah,
Um, Obviously the culture is going to be different.
yeah,
You're going from working full time to now being in school full time
yeah,
and working. So you
yeah,
basically just flipped your entire life on its head, like
yeah.
instantly. And meanwhile, leaving all these people that you knew in India. And
Mhm.
obviously, you had your best friend here, but I don't think your best friend was necessarily at Ithaca. I think you said
No,
UMass, and your
no,
sister wasn't there.
yeah, me, no. Now that you
That's a
say,
lot. It's a lot of
yeah,
change.
yeah, and now that you said it, this is like, yeah, it was. So let me start with Ithaca, New York. I remember so I landed in DC with my sister, and she dropped me off to Ithaca, New York. So I think somewhere it was much better to have somebody in the family there, as compared
Right.
to the students who landed literally alone and had to reach from New York to Ithaca. So I think I had a little bit of an advantage there, having a sister, having a family member drop me off with all the as much as she could do. She tried to
Yeah.
make me comfortable there. But as soon as she dropped me at the apartment that I had rented there in Ithaca, I was like, please don't leave me here. I and I had come from Mumbai, a city which had the buildings and everything, and coming to Ithaca, New York, where I couldn't see anything. And I was like, don't leave me here. I will not make it. And she's like, stay here for a couple of weeks and then see. And then if not, I'll come get you. And this is me old enough. I wouldn't even say that I was young enough or something. I was old enough uh, to not behave like that. But I was like, okay, please don't leave me behind. Anyway, this was August, I think. And October or something. So October, I think, is when snow starts in Ithaca. First time in my life that I saw snow. I had never witnessed it. And if people don't know it, Ithaca, I don't even know how to explain how Ithaca, New York, the winter is for Ithaca. It is brutal, if I can say.
Right. Right.
And coming from India, I mean, the town where we lived, that I grew up, it used to be cold, but we've never seen snow, so I wasn't used to it. But it's so strange that I think that's when I actually fell in love with Ithaca. It was just so beautiful. My friends did not want to get out. And I'm not just talking about people who had come from different countries, but Americans actually. My friends from the other states did not want to step out because either they had not witnessed the snow or they were not used to the weather. And I loved it. I think the I explored Ithaca the maximum on foot in
Yeah.
winters during that time. So that made me fall in love with which people call the most depressing time because of the days are shorter,
Right.
it's
Right.
cold outside, and etc. I just fell in love with the concept. So Ithaca became much easier after that. But what became more difficult was having a standard income in your account at the end of the month, or whenever it happens, that's not coming, and you're studying, which you've not done for the last 8 years of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And and that shift, managing food, managing everything, managing staying away from family suddenly, and managing your expenses within x amount that is in your account every month, that was a challenge that I think started getting to me. And I had not anticipated that the first semester would be so difficult in terms of finding an internship.
Mm-hmm.
And for me, the reason I had done all of that, left the job and moved countries and everything, was for learning. So somewhere I started feeling that it's again the fight to find another job, and that's not what I came here for. I wanted to learn about the function. I wanted to learn about HR, about different things. I'm not learning that. I'm trying to learn about how to fit into corporate. I know that part. That's
Right.
not what I'm looking for. And that, I think, got to me, and I was like, did I even make the right decision? And again, dad, to my saving grace at that time, and dad was like, can you give it some time? You are in a different country where the education system is different. Let's give it this semester. If you think you've not made the right decision, we'll think about it next semester.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, again, do step by step. If you think getting an internship is what they want you to do this time, this semester, focus on that. And I'm like, I'm losing on education time, because this semester is the initial foundation, because we were doing all our foundation courses at that time. But the pressure started getting to me, because the corporate life that I'd seen in India was very different as compared to the corporate life that I was seeing here, in terms of interviewing for companies. Also, if there were 50 companies that were interviewing students, only 10 were sponsoring students.
Right.
So I did not have the option to interview for all 50. And for those 10 companies, there were all international students and the domestic students that were interviewing. So I think that pressure is something that I'd not thought of before, and I had not mentally prepared myself. And I was feeling, and I think that is the point where I was feeling a little lost, that did I even make the right decision? But again, I used the same approach, step by step. Let's just interview one at a time. Let's shortlist the 10 companies. Let's shortlist out of the 10 which are my priorities. Then start interviewing. Then if the next round comes, then start. That's just how I did it. But I would say that was one thing that I'd not prepared myself for sure, in terms of making that decision, and how, about Cornell for sure. And I
Right.
wasn't anticipating it in the first semester, for sure.
No, no. I mean, look, you don't really understand what it's going to be like until you do it, and I think you
Yeah.
realize that. So I have two follow up questions. The first is, you've mentioned your sister, your
Hmm.
father, your mother multiple times throughout your career journey.
Hmm.
How important were they throughout the entire process of you going to college the first time, getting your first job, taking your next job, making your decision to go to Cornell, making your decision to stay in the U.S.? Like, it seems like they're a big part of your career journey.
Big part of my existence. I mean, they are the reason for my existence, logically, technically, everything. But yeah, every decision I think I've made in life, everything that I've done has been a factor of how they have shaped me to be the person that I am today. Whether it is my mom trying to put me into sports because she is a sports person herself,
Mm-hmm.
seeing my father supporting my mother in her passion that nobody else understood, and making sure that she, an educated woman is not at home just because that's what the society wants. He was one of the first in the family who pushed mom to work, and like he said, you have your masters, you have a passion, can you just not, like, why don't you do something? And mom had the same thinking. So having seen that, where a working mother is managing two kids, a mother-in-law, a husband, and the expectations of work and the expectations of the family, and then another additional passion that she had as a child, she played cricket, whether it was for the community. She did voluntary activities for the community. Then later on, she was recognized by the Indian Association and made a member of that. Any which way. So I just saw how every small thing that you want, how this support system around you just has such a big role to play in getting you
Mm-hmm.
there. It's never
Absolutely.
you alone. And for me, that is what was the foundation. I always say that you always need your family is your biggest cheerleader. And that was always the case, whether it was my mom, whether it was my dad in education system, I would say particularly, and then my sister in terms of making sure that I had the horizon. She was the first one in the family to get married in a different country. So she got
Right.
that perspective for us, where I saw what US is like, what it is capable of, what the opportunity that it has to offer and everything. Because she had a successful career here. So every generation in the family, I and my parents, all of us are such close knit family that my parents made sure that they showed us the graph of our generations, how my grandparents were, how their next generation, that is them, they progressed, and then they had, I wouldn't say they had expectations, but that was just an unsaid or unspoken thing. And I'm glad that we did something. I don't know, the next generation would probably land on moon now, now that now that we are here on a half across the globe. But they were very, very important factors at every point in my whether it was career or personal life in the decisions I made, uh, for sure.
Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely got that sense. And I think if you look at, and I like to call it your personal success team of who you surround yourself to help you with your career, clearly
Mm,
your family is a big part of that. So I wanted to make sure we highlighted that. So I think my next logical question is, was all this worth it? Was all this worth it? Was it worth leaving your very successful corporate
mm,
career in India, coming to the U.S., getting your master's at Cornell? You got
mm,
an internship at Cigna. Now you work full time at Cigna with me.
mm.
And the question, was it worth it? This is not a I'm I know how much you like your job and what you do at Cigna today, and we work together quite often. But from a personal perspective and a professional perspective, do you feel that all the sacrifices you've made have ultimately been worth it?
Um, Tough question. Uh, it's too short a time to say it's worth it, but couple of reasons that I would say I'm on the right track at least. One, um, I'm a firm believer of, and again, I think I've said it multiple times, but restating, um, education is something that even if you don't get the value right now, you would get it at some point in time, and that's for you
Mm-hmm.
to have. That's a very personal thing. So it's one of my, I would say, the best accomplishments that I could get. If only I could have just done the PhD that I wanted to do, so that I had
You
the
just
final thing done.
you still have time.
Yeah, and that's what I keep telling my dad, and my dad's like, "Please no." Now I am saying no, just stop it. He's like, "Your CV would not have enough space." I was like, "No, people have done more." But anyway, I think so. Yes, I remember. I don't know if I can say the entire thing has been worth it, but there have been small moments. I remember my Cornell graduation and my dad looking at me and just speechless. He, in my entire life, I've never seen him speechless. And I remember that moment so clearly when he was completely speechless and obviously teared up. And he's like,
He was proud.
yeah. And he just couldn't say anything. And I looked at him and I smiled. And when they announced my name and I went on the stage to get my degree and everything, I came back and he just hugged and just that's it. And it took him a day to process it and say it later that you are the first in the family to actually have a master's from an international school, and not just international school, but you went to an Ivy League school. So you literally set the bar too high. And I can't believe it that I created somebody like this. And I was like, oh, that's a very, very big compliment to have, to get as a daughter.
So let me pause you for a second, because I know that I have 3 kids,
Yeah.
and I understand where he's coming from, right? I mean, it's I remember when we had our first child 8 years ago. It just completely changes you,
Yeah.
and so I absolutely understand the just how proud he was of what you had done, right? I mean, it's hard to explain if you don't have kids what it's like, but
Mm,
once you have children, it's just like, oh my gosh, like they're just the world to you. So it just
mm,
I love to hear that. Was he there?
mm.
Were your parents there in person for the graduation too?
Yeah. Oh,
Oh,
yeah.
that's awesome. Yeah.
100%. Yep. Yep. They had planned it very well in advance. They were here for the entire period. They were here till the time I moved to Philly. They saw the apartment that I had in Philly, and he was just so proud of the fact that, where I was living in Philly, the company, I showed them the office, Cigna office, and he was like, I just cannot believe it that this has happened in a short span of 2 years. He was so proud of the entire journey. Actually, I should not just say he, everybody, mom, dad, sister, and my brother-in-law, all of them were so proud of the journey from Tata's to Cornell and then to Cigna that it just felt surreal to a lot of us. And I think till now, sometimes it just feels like, okay, this happened. This has happened. We've accomplished all of this. So that was one moment where I would say, yes, it was worth it. The
Hmm.
second moment was when the second moment was Philly when I took my parents to the office and I showed them the office and the apartment that I'd taken right in Center City. They were very tense about the fact that Mumbai I had a set career and everything. Would I get something like that? The financial stability that I had in India, given that I'd been working for so long, would I have that in US? When they saw the place I was living, the company that I was working in, the work that they had offered, again, the pride, I think, those small things just made me feel worth it. And the third, I think, for me, very, very important personally, I think for me was I remember when I was being hired by Cigna and in general, even the other companies that I was interviewing with, I was very specific that I don't want a company to think of me as a fresher. I come with a lot of experience
Right.
that I want to put to use in the work that I do next. And the companies that I've worked with have been, all of them are global companies. So I understand how a global company works. And I want to make sure that my experience plus my education is in a mutually beneficial situation for both the organization I work for and my learning in the next role. And Cigna, I don't know who all to thank, man. Seriously, whether it's John, Greg, there's just so many people I have to thank for that. They offered me the role, exactly the role that would have used everything that I had done in the past, whether it was my Tata experience, whether it was my
Right.
HR experience, the technology passion that I had, and it went everything together in a perfect blend. I don't know if it was planned. I don't know if it was, again, sheer luck, hard work, whatever it was. That role made me feel that it was all worth it. The things that don't make me or make me question the decision at times, and something that's really hard that you would probably not have a solution for, any student, any person who's trying to move countries at times would struggle with the same thing. Leaving your parents behind,
Right. Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
aging parents that you probably, and I, being the younger one, and my sister left in 2008, so I was their only support system for the last, I think I moved here 2016, so 8 9 years I was their only support system. And suddenly leaving them behind on their own, they have a support system around that, but they don't have their kids around, right? So
Right.
that is one factor that makes you question everything that else that you do, which feels very individual. And this feels very, oh, am I being a good daughter? Am I doing what I was supposed to do? So I know you asked me a question. Did you know what you wanted to do when you were growing up? The only thing I always wanted to do was, and I know I said astronaut, but my internal thing was I wanted to earn enough money to make sure that my parents had a very smooth life once they
Hmm.
retired, to provide them everything they wanted that they probably ignored while they were busy providing for us, while they were giving us the education and the life that they wanted to provide us. If I could do anything in my capacity to get them that life, I wanted to do whatever job made me do that. And now I feel sitting here sometimes that am I able to do that? And that makes me question, is it worth it? And yeah, so I don't know if I can say, is it totally worth it? Whether there are days that you don't feel it, especially when your parents
Yeah.
are not well, sick at home, alone, in a position where they're not able to do everything on their own. And then there are days that they're so happy for your success, so happy to see you happy, that it's all worth it. And to top it all, I mean, I met, I can't say, I don't know. I mean, I met my partner here. He was here all along. I had no idea. So I had to come here, move to the US to find him here. So I think somewhere it's worth it. And
Yeah.
somewhere someday I would probably make it worth it for my parents also.
No, I think that's a great answer, and I think just going back to the job that you ultimately ended up doing here in the U.S. after grad school, here at Cigna, I think that you mentioned, was it luck or was it hard work that you found a job that kind of took everything, it encompassed everything that you loved about HR into one thing. I think there's always a little bit of luck in every career, right? Because it's not necessarily luck, but it's more timing, right? But
Yeah.
obviously, your hard work, you were able to do the great work that you've done at Cigna because of the experiences you've had both working and school, right? So and combining all that together. And I know one thing that you mentioned at the beginning of all this was you wanted to do work that you were passionate about, and
Yeah.
I clearly, just myself working with you, see the passion that you have for the HR field and what you do. So I think from like a successful career perspective, I think you've gotten to do a lot of stuff that a lot of people haven't been able to do in a very short career. So again, fascinating journey. Love the story. Love to kind of hear your thought process, how your parents played into everything, how you're a lifelong learner. I always close with the same question with every guest. I interview people that I consider successful, that have had really unique, great careers. And I always ask, what is the one thing that's helped you reach your full potential? So what is that one thing that you would share with everyone else that's helped you be so successful?
Oh, one thing is very difficult. I
All
would
right, I'll
say
give you two if you want to do more than one.
I have five,
All right, you have five. All right, go for it.
obviously. Um, One, let me just say, thank you. I am very honored that you think I'm successful in whatever short HR career that I've had. It makes me feel, again, that it's worth it taking the risk that I've taken. So, um, couple of things, especially for anybody who's trying to make this huge change in their careers. I believe for me, learning did not stop. The age did not define it. This stage of my career did not define it. Whether it was as soon as my first job or as late as my fourth or fifth job, I just kept learning, kept adding, and not for the reason that I wanted more things on my CV.
Mm-hmm.
Literally for the reason that I was so passionate about, or I'm still so passionate about the field, and I love it so much, which people somehow cannot understand what is there to love about HR. A lot of people say that, and I was like, because you don't do it, you don't understand it. It's
Right.
very fascinating. So learning for me never stopped, and that's what was one thing. The other thing I think is, don't let anything define you or your potential. Anything, age, gender, location, personal needs, uh, place of birth, anything. I think my dad, again coming from the Indian middle class family, my dad never brought us up as girls. Gender was never played a role in the house. We were just people who had a lot of potential, and then
Interesting.
what do you do with the potential? It was very, very clear for him. So no gender bias, no geographical limitations. That led me to understand potential and then explore as much as possible and experience. I think whether it was going to a different location, finding it out all yourself, figuring it out, and having that faith in your ability. You may be able to do this much, but when you actually get into that situation, you realize you're actually able to do this much. So knowing your ability sometimes is good, but not knowing it is sometimes even better, because you don't know, you don't cap your potential. So that really helps. um, One of the things that I am actually trying and would be really important is learning to balance, like I said, between family and professional and everything, priorities. That's something that's very important, which I would say, um, not very successful at, but would be really important for success. One very important thing which we tend to forget all the time is enjoying the journey. So the fifth thing I think would be enjoying the journey. You need to stop, reflect, and rejoice the smallest of the accomplishments, whether it is knowing your abilities, cherishing the people who helped you in your journey, appreciating. I don't know, I really believe in God. I believe in a superpower that has all the good intentions for me, is looking out for me, and has helped me get through where I am today. In the lowest of my lows and the highest of my highs, I remember him, and then I remember my parents for sure. So, whatever helps you get that strength, make sure that you enjoy and actually pat yourself on the back that you've accomplished something, because that helps you remember the good things. Something that I feel that you might not be able to see it now, but someday if you look very closely and have the time to appreciate, the dots connect. The people who came into your life at different points for different reasons actually were, something I call agents that led you to lead the journey you are on today. So everybody has an inspiring story to tell. It's just you need to stop and think about it and make it into a story to tell, to be able to share. So I said five.
Well,
That's
well, well,
all.
well said. Well, I hope that this journey down memory lane has helped you reflect back on your career and appreciate it. I think a lot of people are going to find this just really helpful, especially those that might want to make the same decision that you made, which is, and it doesn't have to be India, right? Leave one country, go to school in another country, and then stay in that country for work.
Yep.
It happens all the time globally. It's a huge personal and professional decision. I love the way you kind of walked everyone through it. So thank you so much for making time and joining me tonight. Such a great conversation. I appreciate you just being so open and candid about just your whole career journey. So I wish you the best, and thank you again.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a perfect day. Happy Father's Day to everybody who's listening, and happy Father's Day to my dad. Probably going to be hopefully proud of me after listening to this. But thank you so much, Nick. This was great. And anybody, your listeners or anybody who's listening to this one, who feels they have questions around how the experience of the journey was, please feel free to reach out. I will share as much as possible if I couldn't share everything on the call today or on this episode today. You can reach out to me on LinkedIn, and I will share everything that I have to offer.
Yeah, we'll make sure to link your LinkedIn profile in the show description on YouTube and the podcast. And I was just going to say hi to MS's dad. Thanks for raising such a fantastic human, and thanks for being on the show, MS.
Thank you, Nick.
Be well. Thank you.
Thanks, you too. Bye-bye.